Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 250, Chris Boylan, the editor-in-chief of BigPictureBigSound.com, joins me to answer questions from the chat room. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded April 2nd, 2015. Episode 250, Chat Room Q&A. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and editor of AVSForum.com. This week, I will be answering questions from the chat room, so be sure to line up those questions. A little bit later in the show, we will be joined by Chris Boylan, the editor-in-chief of BigPictureBigSound.com. He's racing back from a big Samsung event in New York, and I hope he will be able to tell us a little bit about that when he gets here. Meanwhile, obviously, since this is a chat room Q&A show, I want to make sure everybody knows, those of you who are tuned in live at live.twit.tv can join the chat room, or you can go to irc.twit.tv and join the chat room right there and post questions, anything you like having to do with home theater, audio, video, commercial cinema, anything along those lines, and I would be happy to discuss it. I will do as many as I can. Usually on shows like this, it gets kind of crazy, and we don't get to everybody, but I will certainly do as many as I can. Now, I do want to mention also before we get started that if you put my screen name into your question, which is, my screen name is my name, Scott Wilkinson, all one word, no spaces or dashes or anything like that, then it will show up in a different color on my screen, and I will be able to see it easily. My eye will be drawn to it more readily. Remember, that's my name with no space. Sometimes people put a space in there and it doesn't work. It just looks like the same as everybody else's. I might find it, but I might not. So the other good thing is, at least in some clients, I don't know about everything, but in some clients, you can just start typing my name and then hit the tab key and it'll auto fill in the rest because it is kind of long. Okay, so let me just start with a couple questions that have appeared already in the chat room, and thank you for that. Lawn Dog asks, I saw an article on TV backlighting. Should we really strive to install such a system? Now, by backlighting in this case, I think you mean bias lighting, because LCD TVs have a backlight. That's how they work. That's how they produce their light. But I'm pretty sure what you're talking about here is what's called bias lighting, which is placing a light behind the TV and having it light up the wall behind the TV. And the answer is generally yes, this is a very good thing to do, as long as you do it properly. And the proper way to do it is to get a tube fluorescent light. CinemaQuest is the company that I know best that provides these. It should emit a particular color of white. It should be a white light, and it should emit a particular color of white, which we call D65. And the brightness, the intensity of that light should be 10% of the peak brightness that the TV can produce. If you do that, then what you get is less eye strain. If you're watching, particularly if you're watching in a really dark room. If you're not, if you're watching in a lit room for some reason, then it doesn't matter. But if you're watching under what are really ideal conditions in a darkened room, it helps prevent eye strain by biasing your eyes, which is why it's called a bias light, biasing your eyes to a certain dynamic range. The interesting thing about human vision, one of the many interesting things, is that the total dynamic range, that is the difference between the darkest that the eye can perceive and the brightest that the eye can perceive without pain, anyway, is very, very wide. I think it's on the order of like 1,000,000 to 1. But at any given moment, that range is only about 1,000 to 1. And that range shifts up and down based upon the overall ambient light around us, which is why when you walk from a bright street, say bright outdoors, into a dark theater, for a moment you can't see anything. And vice versa, when you walk from a dark theater that you've been in for a while out into the bright sunlight, you have to squint. It's very, very bright. And that's while your eyes and your visual system adjusts to the overall amount of ambient light that you're in. So having a bias light helps to bias your eyes into the range that corresponds to the TV and reduces eye strain. The bottom line is it reduces eye strain. So it's a good thing to do. Let's see. Chickenhead, sorry, next time I'm in Vegas, probably won't have time to calibrate your TV. Barfel asks, do you have any advice for controlling noise from forced air furnace vents? And that's a fairly expensive proposition. Ideally, you want duct work that is very large, and you want the air velocity coming through the ductwork to be pretty low. And those who build dedicated home theaters often spend a lot of time and money on this. It's not a simple thing to do. So the answer is probably not, unless you want to rebuild your whole HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, because only then can you really do it. Now, I've given some thought to active noise cancellation in such a situation. Many of you have probably had noise-canceling headphones. I certainly wear them on airplanes every time I fly. And what they do is they have a little microphone that senses the noise in the environment and then generate the same signal 180 degrees out of phase. Add it to the noise that's in the environment, and that effectively cancels out that noise. I've thought about this in terms of restaurants, where you go to a restaurant and it's really loud. And I've thought about maybe could you put speakers around the room and microphones around the room and somehow generate an antiphase, 180 degree out of phase signal to reduce the ambient noise level in the restaurant. And in fact, Meyer Sound, a company in the Bay Area, has done some research and work on this and equipped a couple of restaurants. I just read this article a couple of weeks ago. So I wonder if that might not possibly work for something like forced air heating system, which is a steady state noise, and this anti-phase noise canceling technology works best with steady state noise, like on an airplane, which is why noise canceling headphones on an airplane are so good. But if you were to put such a system in your home theater, it might very well cancel out some of that noise. I'm not quite sure what it would do to the sound coming from your theater, though, from the sound system, the intended sound, the sound you want to hear. I'm not at all sure if that would affect that or not. It's an interesting question. So that is kind of the answer to that. Anybody else have any questions? Beatmaster, what guests are you looking most forward to having on? Well, I've got things scheduled out through mid-May, actually. And I'm going to tell you about this at the end of the show, but I'll tell you right now, next week is going to be a very special episode because I'm going to be doing it directly from the offices of DTS. Because on April 9th, next week, they are going to finally reveal some of the details of their version of immersive 3D audio. And it's very exciting because all of us in the home theater business have been waiting with bated breath to find out more information, and they've been very circumspect about it. So there's going to be a big press due out at the DTS offices here in Southern California, where I will be, and I'm going to actually set up my podcast system out there and do the show from there with people from DTS to talk about it. So it's going to be a real scoop. Very happy to be having that on. Let's see. Thoughts? Oh, Dr. Mac, thoughts on Samsung's SUHD. You know what? I'm going to defer that to when Chris comes on, and he'll be here shortly, I'm hoping anyway, because he just attended the big Samsung press event in New York, which had a lot to do with SUHD TVs, as well as some other stuff also. So that's going to be very interesting. F-Loop, let's see. F-Loop asks, now that some time has passed, is there anything from the AES conference that sticks with you as being remarkable or important? Well, there's quite a few things, actually. I wrote about the immersive audio day that they had there, a whole day out of 3. So 33% of the conference was devoted to immersive audio. And I think that that was very important. In particular, Brian Vessa, who will be on the show, I think he's scheduled in August, actually. But he's going to be talking about what he talked about at the conference, which was developing a standard way for movie sound mixers to create an immersive sound mix that is like Dolby Atmos or DTSX or RO or MPEG-H for that matter, and in one way. All they have to do is make one file and then send it out, and it could be rendered by any of those systems. Right now, the way it is that the mixers have to mix for each of those systems separately, which is very expensive. And the studios really, really, really want to have a single way, a single method for creating that mix once and then letting it be rendered, decoded by any of the available systems or anything in the future. So I found that to be extremely, extremely valuable and interesting. We're not going to see that probably this year. The way standards go, it's going to take a while. Let's see. I think I have my notes here, actually, about that. And you know what? When Chris gets here, I'll let him talk a while, and I'll look for a few other things that I found interesting. Binaural headphones, headphone sounds was another thing that we heard. I thought it was really interesting that Sennheiser provided wireless headphones for everybody in the theater, and there were 150 people there. And they showed us some demos of, Bob Schuline showed us, played some demos of binaural recordings that he had made that I thought were very interesting. Uper asks, when will I do a show on home theater projectors? Well, I've done several, but it's probably time, you're right, to do another one. So that's a good idea. Thanks for reminding me. I will put that on the schedule to get somebody from a projector company or 2 or 3 to come in and talk about projectors. Let's see. Speaking of company representatives, I will tell you that last night I had a really fun time. I went to dinner at the Magic Castle in LA, which is a pretty famous place, as a guest of SVS, not a projector company, but a speaker company. And they were in town and decided to host a dinner there, which I went to, and it was tons of fun. And I will be talking. We've done some reviews of SVS speakers on AVS Forum recently. And as a matter of fact, at the moment, we're running a contest. So I should let you know about that as well. All you have to do is go on to AVS. You don't even have to be a member, although, of course, you should be if you're watching this show. And just fill in the reader survey, right? It's on the homepage. Just click on the reader survey, SVS contest link on the homepage, and go fill out that survey, and then you'll be entered to win one of 2 SVS speaker packages, which is pretty cool, and we thank SVS for that very much. Let's see. Oh, Crayon, could you give me some hints about getting 5.1 audio via Chromecast on a TV and surround receiver using Plex on an iPhone? You know what? I have never used Plex on an iPhone, so I probably can't help you too much with that. If anybody else in the chat room knows anything about that, that would be great. I'm sorry to say, that I really don't know much about that. I will say that Chromecast on the TV probably means that you'll be running the digital audio out from the TV to your AV receiver. And in that case, very often, the digital audio output from the TV only carries 2 channel. The TV itself downmixes 5.1 to 2 and sends that to the receiver. I'm not 100% sure if the Chromecast does that, and I don't know whether Plex sends 5.1 to the Chromecast or not. Those are questions that I will need to research and find out about that. Hermes asks, how many years do you think it will be before you personally buy a 4K TV, assuming I don't have one now, and I don't? And wonder what the state of the art is for upscaling 4K. Hearing the tech is not there yet. Bunch of stuff involved in that question, absolutely. I don't plan to buy a 4K TV until high dynamic range and wide color gamut are well-established standards, and there is content available for them. 4K by itself, that is simply more pixels, is not that important to me. I sit 8 feet from my display, and I currently have a 60-inch TV, which is about right for that size for 1080p. If I got a 4K at that size, I wouldn't see much of a difference, and the range of colors and the dynamic range would be the same as I see now. So there's no point, in my opinion, to buy a 4K TV until those elements have been finalized and standardized. And there are several high dynamic range proposals out there. We don't know which one is going to be mentioned. I do have, I think in May, I have coming up Jim Hellman from SMPTE, who's going to be talking about the SMPTE standard for high dynamic range, which is the one that the Ultra HD Blu-ray spec has adopted as its high dynamic range standard, although it also allows Dolby Vision to be used as well, which is another standard. But that's the problem. It's one thing that was said at that AES conference, in fact. The nice thing about standards is that there are so many of them. And that's true, and it's unfortunate, really. It was a joke and kind of sad, really, because what we want is a standard that gets everybody to the same place. And we don't have that now in terms of dynamic range. We do have it probably in terms of color gamut. There are only 2 color gamuts that are being thought of really as successors to 709, which is what we use now. One of them is the same color gamut that's used in the cinema, called P3, which is wider than 709. And then there's the one called BT 2020, which is wider still. And that's the one that everybody sort of sees as the holy grail. But the problem with it is that it's the 3 colors that are used to create all of the colors that we see on the display, red, green, and blue, are very narrow wavelength colors. They are almost laser-like in the narrowness of their bandwidth. And that can cause some problems. In particular, one of them is called observer metameric failure. And this is where somebody looks at the screen and sees something of a certain color, and somebody else looks at the screen and sees a different color. This is not the dress question. That was another perceptive illusion, or optical illusion, I guess you could say. And maybe we can ask Chris about it. Has Chris arrived? There he is. Hey, Chris.
I'm not hearing anything, so if you can hear me, awesome. If you can't hear me, then that's a problem. But I definitely can't hear you. We're trying to tweak things here.
Okay.
I apologize for my lateness. I was at a Samsung event seeing their brand new UHD TVs.
Oh, man. We want to hear about that.
We try to figure the audio issue out.
Okay. Well, let me just keep going while you and John figure out that audio issue. But I am sure glad to see you. And we are going to, Dr. Mack is asking about thoughts on Samsung's SUHD. We're going to hear Chris talk about that very shortly. Anyway, to finish off with Hermes, the other question you asked was about 4K upscaling, which is, of course, what is the major thing that we're going, that people are going to be watching on their 4K TVs for a while anyway. We do have some 4K content coming from streaming, from Netflix and YouTube. There's a relatively new service called Ultraflix, which I just got an email that says they signed up Interstellar. They're going to be offering Interstellar, this new Chris Nolan movie, relatively new, in 4K. So that's very exciting. But again, it's not going to have that wide dynamic range, high dynamic range, or wide color gamut. So this is the thing that's keeping me from buying a 4K TV, because the more pixels doesn't mean that much in my opinion. But high dynamic range and wide color gamut means a lot. You can see it from across the room easily. And it makes a stunning difference, improvement in the picture. So that's what I'm waiting for. I wonder if Chris can hear us yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, all right. Rock and roll, baby. Woo, technology.
Woo-hoo. Love
So
that
just
technology.
so you know, all you geeks, I've got a Ultimate Ears earplug in here to get sound, and then this mic to talk.
Oh,
so,
my
hey,
God.
you know,
Wow.
it's the
What
best
an
of analog and digital.
Incredible improvisation there. That's fantastic.
Oh, it's not?
Well, thank you so much for rushing home after the big Samsung event.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Really appreciate you being here. You might want to tilt your camera down slightly so that your head's kind of closer to the top of the frame. There you go.
Is that better? All right.
Yep. Thank you very much. Oh, you're all dressed up in your Sunday best for Samsung. That's great.
Oh, no, it's just for you, Scott.
Oh, well. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, so everybody,
what'd I miss?
Here he is, Chris Boylan, the editor-in-chief of BigPictureBigSound.com. And you were there with all of our colleagues. I was sorry I wasn't there, but my colleague Mark Henninger was, so he'll be able to cover it. Give us the skinny. What was the big news at the Samsung event? We already know about SUHD, just at least as a concept. What did they talk about there today?
So actually, there were two events. It was one for calibrators and people who are like video guys like myself and you and Tom Norton. And they were telling us what we need to keep in mind when calibrating for a SUHD TV, because now we've got enhanced color spectrums. We've got high dynamic range content. The color space is different from what we're used to in Rec 709 with HD. And that means calibration and setup can be a lot more complicated.
You know, we were just talking about that before you came on. Somebody asked whether or not I owned a 4K TV, and if not, when would I buy one? And I said, not until we have a pretty standardized high dynamic range and wide color gamut system and content for it and TVs that can display it. And the Samsung SUHD TVs are the first that really are making a point of that they can, in fact, do that. Now, did they show at this event, did they show content that had been graded for the high dynamic range and wide color gamut?
Yeah, actually they did. It was the same content that we saw at CES this year in the private briefing. So it was Exodus, I think, is the movie. They had some clips from that, and they had some clips from the Pi. That Pi was Story of Pi.
Life of Pi.
Life of Pi. That's it.
Yep.
And I have to tell you, it looked incredible. I mean, you know, you've got 1,000 nits of peak brightness. Most TVs, you know, maybe peak out at 400 or 500. This at 1,000 nits. So during scenes where you see sunset or a moon, which is one of the scenes they showed in Life of Pi, it was almost too bright to look at. I mean, an area of the screen was just glowing, and the rest of the screen was more subdued. But better still, even in the dark parts of the screen, while you had that really bright image, you still had excellent shadow detail. So, but like you said, we need a standard. We need all the TV manufacturers to come on board with that standard, and then all the studios to follow suit. And then, you know, then we'll be talking.
Now, at the Samsung event, did they talk about color gamut, whether they were using P3, which I mentioned earlier which is what's used in the cinema, commercial cinema, or whether they were trying to really reach out and get to Rec 2020?
Yeah, BT 2020, I think it's called.
BT 2020. That is correct.
Right. They said that really there aren't any displays yet that can really reproduce BT 2020. So I think the goal is, at least for 2015 and for Ultra HD Blu-ray, is to do P3. The studios are all mastering for digital cinema. They've got the P3 color gamut. They've got high dynamic range. Actually, they're sometimes mastering as high as 10,000 nits, and then they're actually reining it in for 1,000. So it's really great to see what the displays are capable of right now. At the earlier Samsung event, they actually had some other technologies on display. I don't think I can tell you what they were, but it might have been a two-letter company, also from Korea. And while that display looked excellent, it definitely was not able to reproduce the full, brightness range of the Samsung.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned that the many TVs, current TVs, can reach 300 or 400 nits of peak brightness, but the content is graded when it's created and mastered and get it made ready for Blu-ray and broadcast and so on. They're mastering that at 100 nits peak brightness. So if your TV can do more than that, you're really, in a sense, distorting what the content creators were looking at when they created the content.
Yeah, that's true. And that's actually going to be an issue with Ultra HD, with HDR as well, because not necessarily, all displays are going to be capable of even doing the full 1,000 nits. So when you take something's mastered for that and then you display it on a display that can only do 800, you have to bring in a different profile, a different HDR profile, and then the mapping may not be perfect. So that's another reason why I think there have to be standards created. And one thing we saw at the Samsung event in the afternoon was the chairman of the UHD Alliance, who's from one of the studios, talked about how there'll be a UHD Alliance seal of approval, effectively like a good housekeeping seal, that takes a look at the premium displays and says they are capable of doing Ultra HD and give it a stamp of approval.
Wow, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that. I've got scheduled, I think, next month, Kevin Miller, Dwayne Davis, and David McKenzie. I think some of whom were there at the Samsung event, I would imagine.
Yeah, two of them.
Yeah, to talk about the UHD Alliance, because they're pretty deeply involved in that. Who was the representative that was talking there? Do you recall his name?
I don't. I can't remember which studio it was. Yeah, I'm sure I have in my notes, but I don't want to rifle through those right now.
Send it to me later, because obviously I might want to get him on the podcast as well.
But yeah, David McKenzie was there. Kevin was there. They actually calibrated the displays in the morning session to make sure that everything was on a level playing field. And David actually has an interesting background, and he still does actually master Blu-rays. So he's a great guy to be looking at UHD TV and the specifications there. As he's a calibrator now, he's also a reviewer, and his background is in mastering for Blu-ray.
Yeah, he's actually a Blu-ray colorist, I believe, is the title that he uses. So he's very attuned to color gamuts and where that color is going to be, and also dynamic range, I'm sure. So I'm just waiting for the Ultra HD Blu-ray spec. That's another thing I'm waiting for, to be finished and for content to come out on that Ultra HD Blu-ray, which I think will typically have higher dynamic range, wider color gamut, and really look amazing on these SUHD TVs from Samsung, and hopefully from other companies. Next year, maybe we'll see at CES more high dynamic range sets with high dynamic range content. That's the key. It's got to be end to end. You've got to have it at the beginning, and you got to have it at the end at the display in order to really take advantage of it. And when we have that, holy smokes, that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of like the early days of HD. We had 720p, we had 1080i, we had 1080p if you were lucky. I think that it's, UHD is really a work in progress. And in 2015, I think the best we're going to get is going to be some HDR 10-bit panels, P3 color space. There won't be 3D, unfortunately. 3D is only is not part of the 4K spec of Ultra HD Blu-ray. Some people are probably rejoicing about that. I personally like 3D. But
I personally do too, and I especially at 4K. One of the biggest and best reasons for more pixels is to use passive 3D glasses.
Right. Yeah, I agree, and having a 4K display makes passive 3D much more palatable, because you've got extra pixels, so losing half the resolution isn't that big a deal when you've got a 4K display.
Anything else you want to share with us from that event, or shall we move on to some chat room questions?
They also showed the new, I think it's called the Radian 360 speaker, which is it's kind of an egg-shaped speaker that radiates sound in all directions. Everything old is new again. I think I saw my first multi-directional, unidirectional speaker probably 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But now it's a Samsung, so it's
now it's
better.
so it's got to be good.
Yeah.
Omnidirectional, I think, is the term you were looking for there.
You're right. Omnidirectional.
Now, placing an
some
omnidirectional. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Okay, I was going to say they also had talking over each other.
Yeah, talking over each other. Let me just finish with omnidirectional quickly. Placement of omnidirectional speakers is a little tricky because obviously sound is radiating from all directions. And so if you place it near a wall, then some of the sound is going to get reflected off the wall and it's going to be phase. There's going to be a phase difference. It's a little tricky, isn't it?
It is. And even with electrostats, which I have, you can't put them too close to the wall. Otherwise, they don't have enough room to breathe. But with omnidirectional, it's even more important. If you put them in a corner, you're going to get a lot of reflective sound as opposed to, direct sound. But I think this is not really meant to be a high-end hi-fi system. This is meant to be something that sits in a kitchen. It provides a nice wide sound field from a single speaker instead of having to worry about having multiple speakers in a kitchen or in a bedroom, something like that.
Yep. Okay, you were about to say one other thing that was at the Samsung event.
Well, yeah, the only other thing they talked about was they had their curved soundbars on display. So
to match their curved screens. Oh no!
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, are any of the SUHD TVs flat?
Yes, but not the highest end ones. You have to go down a couple in the line to get to the flat TVs.
What's your feeling on that? Are you a curved aficionado or a detractor?
I'm kind of neither, honestly. I see that consumers love the curve. They're like, wow, look what I got. I got a curved TV. Like, it's cool. But it really doesn't increase the immersive feeling I get when watching something. I think when you get into the 105 and 120 inch TVs, the curve is kind of cool at that point. Because you're really, it's more cinematic and it's really, taking the entire field of view. But in a 60-inch, 70-inch TV, I think it's more gimmick than anything.
I have to agree. Okay, let's get to some questions in the chat room. In fact, you mentioned your electrostatic speakers, and Shivers in the chat room, who is shivering right now, I believe, in 5-degree centigrade weather, as I recall. I know.
So good.
No. He asks, can you explain how planar magnetic drivers work and how they differ from electrostatic drivers?
I'm sure you can, Scott.
Well, thank you very much. Well, you have electrostatic, so why don't you tell us how those work?
Well, with electrostatic speakers, there's an electrical charge that charges a stator panel. The panel is protected by a metal mesh so that it doesn't get poked by little children with their pens and pencils. And instead of moving an acoustic diaphragm made of paper or metal, it moves this really thin mylar diaphragm back and forth very quickly to reproduce sound. And in that case, you get a larger soundstage because the radiating panel is that much bigger, and it's less mass to move because the mylar panel is so thin. So what you end up with, the sound of an electrostatic panel is one that's much more wide open. It won't appeal to people who like mini monitors and that pinpoint sense of space, like the violin is here and the bass drum is here and the cymbal is here. But if you like a more immersive and deep sound field, then electrostatics are good for that. And my experience, I can't tell you too much about the technology of a planar magnetic speaker. Headphone. But my experience of the planar magnetic headphones is very similar to electrostat. It's a thinner panel and it's moving. It's displacing a little bit more air, but it has a more open sound than the standard acoustic or traditional speaker drivers.
I think probably the main difference between them is that an electrostatic speaker has a static electric charge on one of the elements, whereas a planar magnetic has a fixed or permanent magnet structure in the I think in the mesh between that sandwiches the actual vibrating surface. And in the case of the planar magnetic speaker, current, the actual audio signal is passed through the membrane itself, the mylar membrane, which is coated with some conductive material. Mylar is conductive, actually. And then that electric current, as it jumps back and forth, interacts with the permanent magnetic field and oscillates, causes the diaphragm to oscillate. Similarly to electrostatic, which just does that within an electric field rather than a magnetic field.
You see, I told you could answer that one.
You did, and you were right. Now, the other thing about both of those technologies is they do give you a nice, big, open kind of sound, but they don't go very low. Typically, you need a subwoofer or some sort of what's called a dynamic driver, a large cone driver, to reproduce the low frequencies.
Yeah, like the old quads. I mean, the quads sounded amazing on classical music or in jazz, as long as you weren't expecting that really low, double bass line or the bass drum or the timpani. I think the best combination is to have a planar driver with, as you said, an acoustic woofer. Maybe servo controlled, maybe not, but something that can keep up with the speed of the panel, but really provide that really lowest, couple of octaves.
Yep, exactly. Eric Duckman is asking, my subwoofer is down firing with a forward-facing port. It's sitting on carpet. Is that bad? Should I put something hard under it, like a piece of wood? Fire it at the wall? Not worry about it?
Well, we can each give our opinion on this. I am of the opinion that a carpet is actually okay. Bass frequencies are fairly non-directional, and they will get absorbed to a certain extent by the carpet, but not completely. So putting it on a carpet, you're going to get, it's going to lower the decibel level a little bit because it is going to absorb some of the sound coming directly out of the radiator. But also with the front firing port, you're going to get enough direct sound from that. And with bass, you're actually getting a lot of indirect sound from its reflection off the walls. That I don't think you're going to get necessarily bad results putting a subwoofer on a carpet. I tend to agree. Yeah, I tend to agree.
It's easy enough to experiment. Get a piece of wood and stick it under there and see if it makes a difference. I think more important is where you place the subwoofer in the 100%. Room.
Oh, yeah. And that becomes even more of a factor if you have multiple subwoofers.
Exactly. Which I do recommend generally.
Oh, yeah. General. I mean, the most I've ever played with is 2. I've heard of excellent results with 4. But when you have 2, they interact not only with the room, but with each other. So, typically the recommendation is to calibrate each one individually to make sure you're getting, whatever your reference level is, and then put them both in the mix, measure again using the exact same output signal. And if the level goes down, then you're having phase issues. If the level goes up, then they are actually reinforcing each other. But differences of 6 inches, 12 inches can make a huge difference in the bass response, particularly with multiple subwoofers.
Yep, exactly right. Web8479 is asking, any thoughts on the Tidal service, a music streaming model? Have you tried Tidal yet?
I haven't. That's the one that I think Jay-Z is supporting, right?
Correct. That's and they at the moment they're streaming uncompressed CD quality, that is 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz sampling, not MP3s or these compressed audio formats. And I suppose they're calling it high resolution, which that fits the DEG and CEA's definition of high resolution audio. I disagree with that particular definition. I think it should be better than CD quality.
I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah, but it is probably the highest quality you can get in terms of streaming.
Right.
And
so I actually have played around with Deezer a little bit. And Deezer is the same kind of thing. It's CD quality streaming. I think right now it's only available in the U.S. to Sonos and Bose customers. I believe Bose is one of the ones that's supported.
I think you're right.
To get access to Deezer, which is, again, lossless streaming, CD quality, you have to be a Sonos customer. But the good news is you could just buy the $199 Sonos Play 1 and then get your Deezer account and then stream that through a PC with a USB soundboard and, Bob's your uncle.
Who are you calling Bob?
My uncle.
Your uncle, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. We were talking, before you got here, we were talking about reducing the noise from a forced air heating system, and which is kind of interesting. And I got somebody here. I'm trying to, here it is, almost working. Mitsubishi makes wall mount systems for AC, but they're expensive. We're talking about different ways to reduce the noise.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, well, the basic way to do it is to design your HVAC system so that the ductwork is very wide and the air velocity is very low, because otherwise you will hear noise. Another thing I thought about was Meyer Sound in Oakland has been experimenting with doing active noise cancellation in environments like loud restaurants. And so I thought that might be a possibility. I don't think anyone's ever done it, but at least in a home theater. But I do hope to get John Meyer on the show to talk about that very thing.
Yeah. Well, I think the split units that he's talking about are units which make a lot of sense, particularly if you're living in a city. In those cases, the compressors go out on a roof or outside, and all that comes into your house is these really thin ducts that bring really cool air. Actually, it might be a cool liquid that circulates from the compressor. And then in each room, you actually have, it looks like an air conditioner, but it's only about 10 inches high by about 24 to 30 inches wide. It's wall mount. It's extremely quiet, and all it is a fan. So when you set it to 70, it takes the cool liquid that's circulating through the duct. It circulates it through the fan. It blows the cool air into the room. But these things are whisper quiet. So you're not worried about a central AC unit that's making tons of noise. You're not worried about lots of air chuffing through these ducts all over your house. The only air that's actually circulating is from that fan that's in this really small, like I said, quiet unit. And then if you want to turn it off in one room, you can do that. They've got individual remote controls. You can turn it off during the movie, turn it back on afterwards without having to mess around with your central air.
That's cool. I hadn't known about that. That's great.
And the other thing you can do is actually, if you're going to open up the walls, put insulating material around the ducts. It does help, whether it's insulation or quiet glue, green glue that you can put around.
Green glue.
Yeah. And if you double your wall and put the green glue between the walls, that will reduce the noise of the central AC that's coming from the ducts themselves or the unit or inside the walls. It's not going to change the sound of the air chuffing through the actual vent.
Yeah.
But it can help.
Yeah, that's good. Almost Working also mentions, as far as noise from air vents, use baffling and other solutions to reduce air turbulence. I'm not sure I know of any baffling solutions that would reduce air turbulence, but I'd have to do a little research on that. It's a good idea. Yeah, computers, he says, have reduced noise fans now, so maybe something like that technology might be available to retrofit an existing room and ductwork.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. What do we got? Sandman asks, will the studios be releasing films in 4K within the next few years? I think so. Yeah,
I think that people are going to be disappointed to hear that, in my opinion at least, Ultra HD Blu-ray will not be a mass market format. I think that Blu-ray itself is the last mass market physical format, even though collectors hate to hear that because they love having the wall full of movies. They love the lack of compression. They love being able to put it on whenever they want without an internet connection. I love all those things too, but the profit motive of the studios is so high that I think that 4K is primarily going to be digital delivery. So it's going to be
streaming or download.
It doesn't have to be streaming. If they change Vudu or something like it back to the way that Vudu used to be, which was you'd order the movie a few hours in advance and it actually downloaded the movie to an internal hard drive inside the Vudu player, then you wouldn't have to worry about whether your internet connection is a little bit slower today or faster, because it's actually downloading it in the background and you're playing the digital file locally at that point. And at that point, I agree. At that point, it can be just as good quality as a Blu-ray or an Ultra HD Blu-ray. It could be a massive file. You just don't want to have to do that download at playback time. That's what introduces the problems with streaming. So if they can come up with, if Vudu does it or somebody else does it, they can come up with something with lossless audio, full quality 4K, HDR, deliver it digitally, sign me up.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I agree with you. I suspect that's probably the way of the future. Ultra HD Blu-ray will be there, but I think you're right. It's probably going to be a pretty niche product. And if the download model that you just described becomes reality, then having a physical disc will be kind of superfluous, seems to me.
You have to have a lot of hard drive space.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah,
and the that model might, in fact, include you can only have it for a certain amount of time and then it disappears.
Right.
So there are those of us who want to own the content and be able to watch it anytime, anywhere, all the time, for the rest of our lives. So in that case, the Ultra HD Blu-ray might be the way to go. Although again, that's going to become more and more of a niche market. I think you're right about that.
But when you raised an interesting point, I would pay the studios $50 to buy Blade Runner once. I buy it once. Whatever format you come up with in the future, just give me a download. I'll pay a little bit for artwork if I need it to put it up on a shelf. But I don't mind paying more to just, have a perpetual copy of a film. I bought Blade Runner like 18 times already. Okay, maybe less than 18, but it was a lot.
But a lot. Yeah, right,
yeah,
right.
A lot.
You probably had the VHS tape and the DVD and the Blu-ray and the special edition and
come on, the Laserdisc. You forgot the Laserdisc.
Oh, I forgot the Laserdisc. Sorry. Well, Beatmaster just asked a question that I think we just answered. Are we getting UHD material over media players or Blu-rays? Streaming versus optical? I'm not. Oh yeah, optical disc. What's your bet? We just answered that question, Beatmaster. So there you go. Chris, do you have any experience with Chromecast? I got a question earlier that I didn't really know the answer to, which is how do you get 5.1 from a Chromecast plugged into your TV into your surround system if you're streaming to it using Plex from an iPhone? Complicated system that I haven't tried yet.
No, the answer is you can't.
Oh, tell us more.
Well, because the way Chromecast works, it's connected to an HDMI input on your TV. Yep. And unless you have a Sony TV, and Sony is one of the few that actually does it, no device that's connected to a TV via HDMI can actually stream 5.1 out of the optical output of the TV or out of the ARC, the audio return channel of an HDMI input. Mm-hmm. So the problem is that Chromecast is exactly like a Roku box or an Amazon Fire Stick or an Amazon Fire device in that it's connected to the TV via HDMI. And most televisions, all the Samsungs, all the Panasonics, I can't swear to the other brands, but they will take that incoming 5.1 and they actually convert it to 2-channel Dolby Digital or PCM on the fiber optic output.
Yep, I'm afraid I did note that in what I could say about it was that for the most part, if you've got 5.1 coming into your HDMI port on your TV, it's going to go out the optical 2.0.
Yes. So, as much as I don't really care for the apps built into televisions, that's the only way you're going to get reliably 5.1 output. The Netflix output, the Netflix app built into the television. And it's funny because some TVs can do more or less what Chromecast can do. You go into your Netflix app and you go in and you find a movie and then you click the watch here or whatever the link is. And in my case, I've got the Panasonic VT60 television and a Chromecast, and the Netflix app sees both. So if your TV is a later generation TV with the Netflix app that supports your the app integration, where you can find the movies on your phone and then basically flick them over to the TV to watch in the app on the TV, then you will get 5.1 because it's actually using the app that's resident on the television itself. Okay, well, this is excellent information. Drew Nielsen in the chat room mentions something in this regard. My TV, an LG 47 LW 5700, supports sending 5.1 via optical to my old AVR. This allows me to enjoy 5.1 audio for my TV's built-in Netflix app. Ah, there's the key. What you just said. Right. Now, Drew, I'll bet you if you came in through HDMI from an external source like a Chromecast or a Roku box or anything and went out your optical to your AVR, you'd only get 2-channel. Yeah, and the testing that I've done on a few different TVs, the ATSC tuner built into the television, of course, supports 5.1, and that goes out via fiber, and any of the native apps. So whether it's Netflix or Amazon or anything else. And sometimes there are settings in the menu you have to enable to get it to work. But if they're native on the television, you'll get 5.1 out. If they're coming in via an external box, buy a Sony TV. Yeah, if that's what you want. Yeah. Yep. Undermine makes another point or another question here about this. What about plugging the Chromecast straight into an AVR instead of into the TV? Have you tried that? I've never done that, but there's no reason that wouldn't work. It's just a standard audio video device. As long as you can get a power via USB port, that should work fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool Breeze asks, is there a test or specification that measures a TV's user interface responsiveness? That's interesting. For example, some TVs seem faster switching between setting pages, built-in apps, or just plain navigation. I don't think there is. I have heard of an input lag test for gaming. You know, when the signal comes into HDMI to the time that the whatever happens on the screen. But I've never heard of one for user interface responsiveness. Have you?
No, I really haven't. And you know, back in the early Blu-ray player days, when it could take up to 2 minutes to actually start watching a movie, I had 3 discs in a pile on the shelf and a stopwatch. And I would put the disc in, press the play button, and then watch the stopwatch until it started playing. And in that first couple of generation players, we did record it manually and put it in a little chart because people cared about that back then, back when some of the machines were extremely slow. These days, you know, the faster the processors get and the better they get at the programming, those kinds of issues tend to be minimized. They're not as bad as they used to be. But yeah, I mean, I hear more of those delays in cable boxes, just surfing through channels on a cable box, even now.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
takes a really long time. I mean, Time Warner's got, like, you know, circa 1997 HD cable boxes. Come on.
Yeah, that is a problem. A lot of the cable boxes that you get today are very old technology with slow processors and so on. So that you're right. You're exactly right.
Sorry, I'm hoping Time Warner's not a sponsor of Twit TV.
Well, I hope not too. We're just going on what we know, providing the best information we can, and that's fine.
Yes, we are.
Web 5576 is asking about headphone surround experience with things like DTS Headphone X, Dolby headphone.
Yeah.
Asking if I've had any experience with it. Not much, other than hearing demos or what have you. Have you done much of that at home, Chris?
A bit. Headphone X was really an incredible demo at CES. Probably one of the most impressive demos I've ever heard.
Yep.
The actual content that made it out, I think there was the Superman music soundtrack was encoded in Headphone X.
Man of Steel, actually. Yeah,
Man of Steel.
Same story, but yeah.
And it sounded bad. It really, you know, at least in the headphones I listened to it on, it didn't maintain that same kind of pinpoint precision that I had heard at the CES demo. DTSX itself, I'm not sure if you've heard about this, but the actual formal details of that are being announced next Thursday.
Exactly.
April 9th.
In fact, I as I said earlier at the show, I will be there, and I will be doing this podcast from the DTS office.
Wow. All right. Hey, maybe I'll stop by again because I'll be there.
Oh, you will be? Fantastic.
Yeah, and we don't know this part at this point is speculation, but I'm assuming they're going to do kind of what Dolby has done. When Dolby put out Dolby Atmos, they took the latest version of Dolby ProLogic 2X and ProLogic 2Z. They wrapped it all together in something called Dolby Surround. And that became part of the Atmos suite. So if you have non-height enabled content, it can get up converted to height content using Dolby Surround. I think any of the receivers that have DTSX will probably have the Neo X and DTS Headphone X built in, I'm hoping. So at that point, you know, you should be able to take any receiver that supports DTSX, and it'll also do Headphone X and any, you know, compatible content.
You know, I didn't realize that Dolby Surround upmixing was actually just Dolby ProLogic 2X and 2Z smushed together. That's interesting. It makes sense, but I didn't realize that's what it was.
I would call it the evolution of Dolby ProLogic 2Z, at least from talking to the Dolby guys about it and from actually listening to it. It does, I think, a lot of what PL2Z did. And if you listen to the same demos that they told us to listen to like 3-4 years ago when PL2Z first came out, it's a very similar kind of experience. But honestly, it's just a stopgap until there's more content available in the actual native Dolby Atmos or DTSX or Oro 3D formats.
Yep, or MPEG-H. I mean, this is one of the problems with immersive audio standards, which I was also talking about earlier, that there are so many standards. You know, the good thing about standards is there are so many of them. And, you know, so I'm hoping that, well, you know, we now have codecs that there are several in every AVR. There's DTS, several flavors, Dolby, several flavors. so on and so forth. And I imagine there will be of these immersive codecs as well. What the professionals, the content creators are worried about is that right now they have to create a different mix, a different file for each of them. And what they want to be able to do is just create one and have it be able to be played by any of them. And that's what SMPTE is working on right now.
Right, and I think DTS is involved with that spec using its MDA format, which is really DTSX. It's just the non-consumer version of DTSX. It's an object-oriented format, not unlike Dolby Atmos. If they can get to be part of that SMPTE spec, then that will get their immersive audio and object-based audio format out there, I'd say, quickly. But that's still a work in progress. So we don't really have news on that front yet.
Well, hopefully we'll hear something next Thursday, huh?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, me too. My understanding, by the way, of MDA, multidimensional audio, and DTSX is that MDA is what the content creators will use to create the content. DTSX is the codec that will be used by consumers to decode that content and put it into their sound system, whatever it might be.
Right, but that means also they're doing the DTSX encoding for the Blu-ray and any other format that delivers the format for home, delivers the content for home.
Right, right.
So it's not going to be MDA on the Blu-ray. It's going to be DTSX on the Blu-ray.
Correct. Barfel in the chat room is asking, how about using 6 colors instead of 3 on TVs? Instead of just red, green, and blue, why not use cyan, magenta, and yellow as well? We saw that Sharp, of course, tried this with its Quatron TVs, and including a yellow subpixel. My personal feeling about it is it's not really necessary because you can get cyan, magenta, and yellow perfectly well out of red, green, and blue.
Red, green, and blue, yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that they just need to expand the spectrum and the variation within each of the primaries. And then if they do that, then of course they can add those together in an infinite sequence, right, to make any color that's imaginable.
Well, that's within that triangle of red, green, and blue.
Yeah.
I suppose one thing might be to extend out the cyan, yellow, and magenta farther than they would be by creating red, green, and blue, and create a hexagon rather than a triangle, and be able to represent more colors that way. But there would have, the studios would have to use that. TVs would have to be able to do it. Again, it's an end-to-end thing that I don't see happening.
No, I agree with you. I think that, we're having enough trouble coming up with good content that's Rec 709. And now we've got 2 more, right? We've got P3, which is part of the digital cinema standard, and BT 2020. So, there are ways to get to, along the way to getting better and better color reproduction. And I think we can only get there in small steps.
F-Loop is saying, I weep at the faux K, F-A-U-X, streaming future, 4K at less than 5 to 10 megabits per second. Yeah. Don't we need an HD and a UHD quality metric that can be used to specify if a stream or broadcast encoding is really psycho-optically, thank you, that's a very good word, high fidelity or high definition? I don't know. Yes, it'd be great to have a metric, but the codecs are getting better and better, that we're starting to see higher quality coming off of streaming, and certainly downloading, as you said, can be anything up to and including Blu-ray quality or better. So I don't know if we can really expect to come up with a quality metric, a visual quality metric. That kind of an interesting question, though.
Yeah, and how would you measure it? The best measurement tool we know of is the human eye. But what's your standard? What's your benchmark? Everybody sees things a little bit differently. I can tell you, objectively speaking, that I've got Netflix. I've got about a 20 meg download, and there are times where I'll put on a movie on Netflix in full HD or Ultra HD, whatever the hell they call it on Netflix. Yeah. I can say hell, right? Yeah.
You can, yes.
All right, good.
That's okay.
And it looks like VHS, on a bad day. I watched the first 5 minutes of Braveheart a couple of weeks ago with my son. He loved it, by the way. But it on Netflix, until it caught up, the first few minutes of the film were horrible, and that was supposedly their HD stream. So,
oh man,
You know, I mean, with that, I don't even want to see what 4K streaming is going to look like.
I think
and you know
Netflix
what, honestly,
is.
It did get better.
Ahead.
Yeah, it got better as the network speed improved, or maybe some people went to bed and my cable connection got better. But at the very beginning, I mean, it's so hit or miss, and it's so all over the place that I'm not a big fan of streaming when it comes to quality.
Yeah, yeah. I think Netflix specified, I heard this somewhere, that Ultra HD was going to require a minimum of 15 megabits downstream coming into your home dedicated to that. And if you have 20, it should work. But if HD didn't even look that good, at least at the beginning, till it sort of caught up, I agree with you. Quad HD or Ultra HD is going to be dicey at best.
Well, you know what I'll do? I'll just change the password on their Wi-Fi router so my kids can't get access from their devices anymore. Sorry, watching 4K. Sorry.
Undermined is mentioning something that I think I don't recall now if I mentioned about Tidal, which is that it will be supporting Meridian MQA, which I find very interesting. I think Meridian MQA is quite interesting. It's a compression. It's a lossy compression in a sense, but they claim to be able to represent 24-bit 96 kilohertz and even 24-bit 192 kilohertz in something like 1 megabit per second bandwidth, which is the same as CD, and yet be able to fully realize the quality of those higher resolution audio formats. I have not yet heard a demo myself that convinced me that that was true, because they were, oh, look, compare this to a 128 kilobit MP3. Well, yeah, sure, exactly, it sounds better.
Yeah.
Have you heard demos of MQA?
No, I haven't actually. I've been to a couple of Meridian briefings, but I don't think it were specifically on MQA. They were on new speakers that they've been putting out. I think last year was the last time I went to a Meridian thing. But now, who did you say that they're going to be partnering with to deliver the content?
Tidal.
Oh, with Tidal. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. So that'll be very interesting. I agree. Yeah. Hermes asks, when will glasses-free 3D become as good as glasses 3D? Never?
My answer would be never.
Okay.
I've seen it. I've seen the Dolby ones. I've seen the other company, Streamscape, or whatever they're called.
Stream TV Networks.
Stream TV Networks. As recently as last CES, and they just look bad. I mean, you know, there's the Fresnel lens in front of the TV that gives us image distortion. You walk around from zone to zone, and it never really looks right.
Kind of ripples around.
Yeah, and I think consumers are already, for the most part, sick of 3D. They never wanted it in the first place. It was pushed on them by the manufacturers. I mean, this is the party line, right? I mean, a lot of people feel this way. I personally enjoy 3D, but I did not enjoy any of the glasses 3D that I've seen, and I've seen, you know, the latest prototypes. So I think honestly that it's going to be abandoned before it ever comes to market in a big way, because it's just, I'm sure they're doing focus groups and the people are like, blah, you know, it looks terrible. So
yeah. I've seen, when I see something like that, and I've seen Stream TV more than I have Dolby 3D, but when I'm sitting down and not moving around, I think it looks pretty good myself. But you're right, doing anything of moving around, it really breaks apart really bad.
No, but even sitting down, I mean, if you put on decent quality 3D content, it doesn't quite have the depth of field that you get with glasses. And it just never, to me, seems as sharp as what you get with a good 1080p TV with, you know, active glasses.
Dallas Dave is asking, will 8K TVs be out later this year? No.
I'd agree with that. No.
No. However, we must say that people are starting to talk about 8K. Certainly NHK, the Japanese public broadcasting system, has been talking about it for a number of years. And I will see it again at NAB next weekend, rather. And a very well-known camera company by the name of Ikegami announced that they are going to be demonstrating 4K and 8K cameras at NAB. So, you know, people are talking about it. I don't think it's going to be a consumer format for anytime soon. The one good thing I see about 8K capture is that it can then be mastered in 4K, and it will look better than if it had been captured in 4K to begin with. Same as if you capture in 4K and then down-res to Blu-ray 1080p, that's going to look better than if you captured at 1080p in the first place.
Yeah, I agree, but I think that, you know, falling into that whole trap with numbers is it's a slippery slope that you'll never come back from. 4K TVs, when they first came out, Ultra HD TVs, really didn't look appreciably better than 1080p TVs, even if you were, you know, within 5-6 feet of them. Until you got to really, really large TVs and you're pretty close in the viewing distance, they tried solving a problem that didn't exist. We didn't need more pixels, we needed better pixels. So what they're doing now with Ultra HD and with this, you know, high dynamic range and enhanced color scope, is they're saying there's a lot of elements that make a picture look better. And resolution is not one that we need to worry about right now. We've got 4K. 4K is enough pixels for a 200-inch screen, as far as I'm concerned. Give it better color saturation, better black levels, better motion resolution, and then you'll have a TV that looks more real, more realistic. I only wish that they had plasmas out now that were 4K resolution. I think they would look amazing. But you know, they died an untimely death, and now we're stuck with LED LCD technology and to an extent OLED. But OLED needs to catch up with LED LCD TVs in terms of overall brightness level, some of the motion issues that they have, and color accuracy. It's still a little bit of an issue. When you only have one manufacturer who's making the TVs, they don't really have to compete with much, so they can A, sell it for a very high price, and B, you know, they're not as incented to really improve the technology quickly.
Well, on the other hand, I will say that the cost of LG OLEDs has come down dramatically. I mean, the first generation 55-inch started out at 15 grand and ended up at 3.
Yeah, you're right.
So that came down quite a lot. Did you hear? I posted a thing on AVS this week about that. I heard a rumor, or I read about a rumor, and I normally don't report rumors, but this one was just too good to pass up, which was a rumor coming out of Korea that Samsung was going to start looking perhaps at OLEDs, getting back into the OLED TV game with the white OLED and color filters scheme that LG uses.
Yeah, I heard the same rumor tonight, and Samsung's response to that was no comment.
As I wrote in my piece, I said, you know, I bet you if I asked Samsung, their response would be no comment.
I didn't read your piece, but that's exactly what they said. Honestly, you know, those two companies are so competitive. You know, you could be living in Korea, you can marry an American, doesn't speak a word of Korean, and they'll be embraced by the family and welcomed into the fold. But if you work for Samsung and marry someone from LG, you're done. No one's talking to you.
You're toast.
Yeah, sorry.
It's an incredible. You're right. It's an incredible rivalry. Somebody on AVS was mentioning about how they have these sort of dynasties, these corporate conglomerate dynasties, and LG is one, and Samsung is another. And as you say, ne'er the twain shall meet.
Yeah, you would think, you know, being so close to each other, same country, in the same market, maybe there would be some co-opetition going along, and maybe a little cooperation. Nope, not happening. Not happening.
No way. Okay. Well, listen, boom, we're done. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, sorry for the late arrival. I will be sure to get the time zone right next time.
Yeah, you're out 3 hours later than us, not 3 hours earlier than us. Well, plus you had kind of an important thing to do. You had the Samsung thing to go to. And I'm sorry I had to miss that, because I'm sure it was very interesting, and I know a lot of people flew in for it, but Mark Kenninger will be writing about it on AVS. You'll be writing about it on your website, which, of course, is bigpicturebigsound.com. And that's Chris Boylan, the editor-in-chief of Big Picture Big Sound. Thanks so much for racing back home and joining me for the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
You bet.
Bye, guys.
Hey, stick around. Don't go anywhere just quite yet, because we have something to do in the housekeeping realm. But let me just finish up by saying you can find me at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott, also at avsforum. And you can always find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/htg. Also on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twithometheatergeeks. And don't forget, Our new start time for Home Theater Geeks is now 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Chris. And goes for an hour as usual, but we're just half an hour earlier than we were previously. So don't forget that so that you can tune in live. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, next week will be a very special episode. I will be broadcasting directly from the offices of DTS, where I will have just been exposed to some information that we've all been waiting breathlessly for about DTSX. And I'll have a couple of people on from DTS to talk about what they will be revealing, and I will be very happy to bring it all to you almost as a scoop, almost as it's happening. So be sure to tune in for that. I do hope you will. Until then, geek out.